Hello, I'm Charlotte Douglas, Community Archaeologist for AOC Archaeology Group, and I'm speaking today about how over the last year or so we have found alternative ways to provide opportunities for people to engage with and participate in community archaeology. Usually when we deliver a community archaeology project, we incorporate fieldwork, survey or excavation, and talks, training workshops, working with schools, outreach, all delivered in person, usually in the project's local area. Now, of course, none of that has really been possible since March 2020, so we have had to look at other ways of getting people involved in archaeology. The first project I'll speak about is Whittadure Historic Heart of the Lammermuirs, a community art and archaeology project focusing on the catchment area of the Whittadure Water, which spans parts of East Lothian and the Scottish Borders. The project was instigated by Chris Bowles, previously of Scottish Borders Council, and led by SBC in collaboration with East Lothian Council. The project began in 2019 and we'd led lots of activities in the months before lockdown began, from excavations to guided walks to working with schools. The last excavation that we were able to deliver took place in March last year, just before the first lockdown, and we initially delayed plans for further work, hoping we'd be able to pick up where we left off. But as the year went on and the restrictions were extended, it became clear that even with an extension to the end date of the project, we weren't going to be able to fit in any more face-to-face activities like fieldwork. So we reassessed and came up with a new plan. One of the aims in all of our community archaeology projects is to introduce children and young people to archaeology and to encourage teachers to incorporate archaeology into their learning, whether by providing opportunities for school groups to get out into the landscape to learn about archaeology, or by bringing archaeology into the classroom. Now, we've done both of those things as part of the Whittadure project earlier in the year, working with a primary school in Duns to explore their local hill fort on Duns Law, also building replica roundhouses, exploring LiDAR data and learning about artefacts back in the classroom. However, the project had always incorporated the creation of some teaching resources. Often this would comprise a printed booklet, usually also available as a PDF, which would be distributed to local schools with ideas for activities, worksheets for photocopying and using in the classroom, and sometimes handling collections as well. So in light of lockdown and the remote learning that seemed set to continue for quite some time, we adapted this plan, expanding the scope and scale of the resources, making them freely available online, and designing them to fit a remote learning environment. Usually we would create resources for teachers to deliver in the classroom with all the advantages of the contents of the school stationery cupboard, and lots of space and the opportunity for learners to work together in groups. This time we put together downloadable teachers' notes for each of the relevant time periods and designed activities that required very few materials, sticking to things that most learners might hopefully have at home, and suggesting lots of alternatives if they didn't have the things that we suggested in the activities. We designed a lot of the activities so that learners wouldn't need to print things out, since lots of us just don't have printers at home these days. We made short videos for a lot of the activities, which are useful for both learners and their grown-ups, to help provide them with clear instructions on how to carry out the activities. We also had our illustrator create reconstructions of some of the sites that we worked on during the project, bringing the sites to life, highlighting the change in the landscape over time and helping learners visualise the sites in the past more easily. And these were incorporated into the resources throughout. Our aim really was to create resources that provided teachers with options, tasks that they could set for their learners with minimal preparation. They might introduce their learners to some of the background and basic concepts using information provided in the downloadable notes, but the activities themselves were sorted and ready to go. The learning resources went live in the autumn of last year, and a spike in website traffic in January this year, when many pupils were learning from home once again, indicates that teachers are using the resources and, we hope, finding them useful. An entirely new element of the project, which was instigated by lockdown and the adjustment to the project's outputs, was the Whittadure Festival in May 2020. This was led by heritage consultancy CMC Associates, with whom we collaborated throughout the project. CMC coordinated an online festival to celebrate what would have been the 220th birthday of Dr. George Henderson of Churnside, a local doctor but also a poet, historian and founding member of Berwickshire Naturalists Club. Musicians, poets, photographers, storytellers and archaeologists contributed over 120 virtual events hosted through the project's Facebook page and providing a weekend of lively entertainment when options for getting out and about were still pretty limited. The festival reached well over 4,000 people and the posts continue to be viewed and enjoyed even now, a year later. So please do go and have a look if you're interested. The URL is right there. There's lots to see and watch and listen to. Another project that we've had to adapt and adjust in light of the restrictions over the last year is the Rins Revealed Community Archaeology Project, which is part of a project to develop a coastal walking route around the Rins of Galloway. We are working with Dumfries and Galloway Council on enhancing opportunities to explore the archaeology of the Rins via the coastal path. We had already undertaken a comprehensive survey of Doon Castle Broch with a team of participants, but further fieldwork for 2020 had to be delayed, and like many other things in the last year or so, we moved online in the interim. One of the project's aims was to record the enigmatic Kilmorey stone, a medieval carved stone which stands in Kirkholm churchyard. That work would usually have included an opportunity for participants to get involved, learning about the methods that we use and kind of getting closer to the stone itself. Since that wasn't an option this time, our survey team went down there and recorded the stone, and the 3D models are freely available online now for anyone to explore. And we used the 3D models to enhance an online event with renowned art historian Professor Carol Neumann de Vegbar of Ohio Wesleyan University in the United States. She delivered her talk from her office in America with the 3D model shown on the screen and manipulated so that viewers could clearly see the various elements of the intricate design as she discussed her interpretations. The way in which 3D models can bring archaeological sites and artifacts to a wider audience, regardless of geographic location, and the benefit of these photogrammetric models in making the tiniest details easier to make out, has perhaps really come into its own in this last year or so when we haven't been able to travel around so much to see things in person. Now, I won't talk for long about the benefits of online talks. You're all attending an online event just now after all, and the relative advantages and/or disadvantages of this format are self-evident. But in this instance, we were delighted to incorporate a contribution from an eminent expert who we couldn't have asked to present something similar in person. And that opportunity to make links around the world and share information and interpretation from much further afield is an exciting one that I think benefits all of us. A summary of Carol's talk is now available on the website, and the model is available on AOC's Sketchfab profile. The Rins Reveal project continues, and we are making plans now to get back out into the landscape with groups of participants and crack on with the fieldwork in the coming weeks and months. So we'll move on now to Machars Waterborne, a community archaeology project from the Whithorn Trust. It's funded by Historic Environment Scotland through their Year of Coasts and Waters Fund and has involved interrogating LiDAR data for possible new archaeological sites around the coast of the Machars and close to bodies of water further inland. Very briefly, for anyone not familiar with LiDAR, it stands for Light Detection and Ranging. It's a method of airborne laser scanning which creates detailed 3D models of the landscape, and the data can be manipulated to get rid of things like trees and vegetation, which would otherwise obscure the archaeology underneath. So for example, here's Risbane Camp, well-known Iron Age fortified settlement as it appears in LiDAR data on the left and in aerial photography on the right. Looking at LiDAR data is a really great way of reassessing existing archaeological sites and also discovering new ones. There's lots of LiDAR data out there available online, but in its raw form, it's not very user-friendly. So one of the things that we've done in the first instance is process the data to produce more comprehensible models, which can be explored. This can then be hosted on a public website with historic mapping information, information from the local historic environment record, and satellite imagery to help interpret the data. And then there are tools available for marking possible sites. You just tick a box and write a little note, and other people can see which possible features have already been flagged up. So here's the map as it stands, with participants having marked possible sites all over the Machars. Usually we would get together a team of interested local volunteers and run group training sessions in a village hall or community centre, showing people how to use and interpret the LiDAR data so they can go off and explore the data themselves and find new possible sites. That wasn't an option this time around, but this is perhaps an element of community archaeology that has lent itself really well to a move online. The workshops were delivered instead virtually via Teams, facilitating participation of people from all over the place, as far afield as Australia, but also people kind of semi-local to the project, you know, perhaps with a connection to the area, but maybe too far away to have attended training sessions in person. And of course, local participants as well. To date, the team of volunteers has identified over 200 new possible archaeological sites. You can see some of those on here. And in the coming weeks, we'll be getting out into the Machars to explore some of those sites, going out and ground truthing them, confirming which are real, likely to be actual archaeology, and which are not. All of that information is then fed into the local historic environment record, providing a meaningful contribution to the archaeological record, and one that project participants can rightly feel very proud of because they've discovered previously unidentified archaeological sites from the comfort of their own homes. Now, online events certainly aren't the answer to everything. We have to acknowledge that they do exclude swathes of people who aren't confident with technology or don't have access to decent internet, or just don't have the necessary devices. What's more, online events certainly can't replace getting out into the landscape, getting to grips with archaeology on the ground, and interacting with other people in person. And that social aspect is really key to community archaeology. A lot of people love getting involved because of the opportunities to meet people and socialise, and we don't underestimate that at all. But we certainly intend to take a blended approach going forwards, incorporating in-person and online events and engagement into our community projects in the future. At the moment, for example, we're excited to be working with Callender's Landscape, a landscape partnership based around Callender near Stirling. As it stands, we're planning on the basis of being able to get volunteers on site to take part in excavations at a couple of hill forts near Callender later this year, and we'll be combining on-site activities with online events. We're also working with local schools to provide learning experiences around the work at the hill forts, and at this stage, schools are understandably quite reticent about making plans, whether that means having visitors in the classroom or taking groups of pupils out on trips. And with things being still quite uncertain right now, it's hard to know what the coming weeks and months will hold, so we're being flexible, providing schools with a range of options to choose from, including outdoor learning or online learning sessions. We'll provide resources in advance and meet with learners virtually. And really, we're just going to have to wait and see what seems appropriate in due course. And I think this flexibility is going to be key as we move forwards. All of this has been a pretty steep learning curve for us, and we have a lot of learning still to do. But making the most of online resources and communications, we've been able to bring archaeology into people's homes and provide meaningful experiences in the absence of face-to-face engagement. That said, we do look forward to being able to take our community projects back out on site and into the landscape again. So please do keep an eye out for events from Callender's Landscape, the Whithorn Trust and Rins Revealed coming through the summer and into the autumn. And I'll just finish by saying thank you very much to the projects we've worked with over the last 15 months or so, including those that I've mentioned today. Thank you.